Hello, I'm Karen Giannoni. We begin in the Middle East, where there are fears that a fragile ceasefire in Lebanon could collapse after Israel and Hezbollah launched attacks against each other. Both sides say they were retaliating to violations of the Truce agreement. The deal ended 2 months of full-scale war. The Lebanese Health Ministry reported at least 9 people were killed in 2 villages. Israel said it targeted Hezbollah rocket launchers and infrastructure in response to a mortar attack on an army post. There has been reassurance from Washington that the ceasefire is still holding. Here's State Department spokesman Matthew Miller.
When you have any ceasefire, you can see violations of it, and that's why we set up this mechanism in the first place, because we knew that there would be potential violations. Just as anywhere in the world, when you see a ceasefire implemented, you see various violations at times. Ultimately, what we don't want to see is the ceasefire break down, and we've not seen it.
Our correspondent Yolande Nell is in Jerusalem.
I think the ceasefire is looking increasingly shaky, although what we've been hearing from behind the scenes is that both parties still do want it to hold. I mean, this was Israel's most serious and deadly strike since the ceasefire came into effect in the early hours of Wednesday morning last week. And we had the Israeli military saying that it hit these targets across Lebanon. We're particularly hearing about those fatalities in the very south of Lebanon. There's been another warning from the Israeli military to residents of that area this morning that they should stay away for now. The Israeli troops remain based in the south of Lebanon, close to the Israeli border. And Hezbollah said that when it fired those mortar rounds at the Sheba Farms area, it's a flashpoint area which is Israeli controlled, but it's right there where you have the borders meeting of Lebanon and Syria and Israel. Hezbollah said that that was meant to be a warning response after earlier deadly Israeli airstrikes that had taken place, killing 2 people. And we had the Lebanese Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri saying there'd been more than 50 Israeli violations of the ceasefire in recent days. He, of course, was somebody who was key to the negotiations brokering help, which were brokered by the US and France, the ceasefire deal. And Israel has been saying that it does reserve the right under the terms of the ceasefire when it sees violations by Hezbollah to act. So I think a lot now really depends on this supervisory, this monitoring mechanism that was set up by those who mediated the ceasefire to really get it working very effectively. And certainly US officials did say that there was more work to do.
Yolande Nell in Jerusalem. Well, Amin Saikal joins us now. He's Emeritus Professor of Middle Eastern, Central Asian and Islamic Studies at the Australian National University and joins us from Canberra. Welcome to you. How confident are you that this ceasefire will hold?
I'm not very confident, but at the same time, I think both sides would like to see this ceasefire holding. Although Israel has violated the ceasefire something like 50 times, which has now been confirmed by the French sources. At the same time, the Israeli spokesman has said that they remain absolutely committed to maintain the ceasefire. I mean, Hezbollah has retaliated once, and then Israel controls the air over Lebanon and with a very powerful air force, and is able to hit a target anywhere in Lebanon. So it all really depends on the Israeli side whether they would like to really make sure that this ceasefire holds for the next 60 days and will lead to a permanent, something permanent, which the Americans have said that this is what they want to see, but that remains to be seen.
Well, interestingly, yes, because the Israelis say that the Hezbollah attack was the severe violation of the ceasefire, that Israel would respond. But what needs to happen to consolidate the fragile situation that we have there on the ground? What needs to happen to put pressure on both sides to make this last?
Well, I think the supervisory team or the monitoring team will have to become far more active, and also the United Nations forces or the peacekeeping forces will have to become proactive along the border. and the Lebanese army would have to be deployed in the southern Lebanon, the places which are going to be evacuated by the Israelis. But that cannot really happen until Israel starts withdrawing its forces from southern Lebanon. And as far as Israelis still remain, and they have not really withdrawn their forces. In fact, they should have started that process. Then the situation remains very fragile, and Hezbollah is not really going to sit with his hands on his arms and wait for Israel to bomb its targets unrestrained. And at some point, of course, as it is already done, to retaliate, and that could result in a major escalation.
While we have you here, I wanted to ask you about the not unconnected situation in Syria. How do you view the advance of those Syrian rebels, HTS, into Aleppo, a city of more than 2 million people?
Well, in a way, it is really connected because Israel has weakened Hezbollah, and Hezbollah used to be a strong supporter of the Assad regime in Syria, along with Iran and Russia. And that has really created an opportunity for the opposition forces to Assad regime to come and, in a very surprise attack, take over Aleppo, the second largest city in Syria, and, of course, move down south towards Damascus. I think the Iranians and the Russians would make sure that the Damascus doesn't fall and the Assad regime is saved. But again, that will involve a lot of bloodshed and a lot of bombardment and a lot of misery for the people of not only Aleppo, but other cities which are coming under the control of the opposition forces. And the opposition forces are the sort of radical Islamist forces, which in the past have had links with Al-Qaeda. And they have the momentum at this point, but whether the Assad forces and the Russians and the Iranians will be able to hold them back, I think that only the next week or so will tell us.
Briefly, if you will, just on that matter of what kind of rebels these are, how would you define HTS? Because there has been talk that they were moving towards a more moderate path. How extremist, how Islamist are they?
Well, it used to be called Jabhat al-Nusra, which was linked to Al-Qaeda, but in 2016, it decided to change its name and also to declare that it is broken its links with Al-Qaeda, and therefore it's pursuing a more moderate path. But then again, that could only be tested when to see how they're going to really run Aleppo and how they're going to run some of the other cities that they're going to occupy or they have already occupied. And so from what we really hear, that in Idlib, which is another border town along the border with Syria, they've done a reasonably good job in terms of taking care of the public, but whether they will be able to really manage as a big city like Aleppo and, of course, some of the other major cities like Homa and so on, I think that remains to be seen.
Professor Amin Saikal, thank you, joining us from Canberra.